Wow, thanks so much. It's fantastic being here. It's an honor. I feel like I've already done all the talking I could possibly do yesterday. Yep. Oh. So this is my talk for today, and I'll try to follow that as closely as possible. Actually, I had a fantastic talk with Paul last night, just sort of off the record about festivals and the fact that they never have any problems, or there's any negativity, or you never really have to talk with people in the community. And of course, there's always challenges to it. And so it was just incredible hearing both the stories of theater and the jazz festival, how they work in really small communities, because it does take a lot of people to put things together. I'm going to back up just to talk a little bit about, because Paul reminded me of my work in New York Mills, and I actually started a music and film festival in New York Mills. This is the New York Mills Cultural Center, which I talked about yesterday. After this building was done, I realized that I really needed to take a break. So over 2,000 volunteer hours from the community went into this building restoration. One of the things that I noticed, just when Sarah was talking about her work and the volunteer hours that we had, we tracked those volunteer hours, and a lot of that volunteer work was gutting the building, taking out wheelbarrows full of rubble into dumpsters. 80% of the work and volunteers were done by women. Men just didn't want to do the hard work. So I was one of the few volunteers that were male who did the work. Everyone else was women from the community who really believed in the project and the idea. So I thought, what am I going to do once this building is open? I decided I needed to take a break. I bought a 1966 Ford Galaxy red convertible that I bought for $1,500 because I saw it on the side of the road. Didn't know if it would run or not, and I drove it out west, just on a road trip. And on that road trip, I thought of the idea for something called the Great American Think-Off. And as I was telling Paul, I saw a music fest in Breckenridge. And I stopped, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. They're set up for 10,000 people. It's on a mountain. This is really cool. Blues festival. I'm going to see these awesome blues musicians. I sat there and waited for the audience to get there. Nobody showed up. There was like 100 people, and it was set up for 10,000. There were almost more security guards than people there. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is how you don't do something. And then it got worse because they didn't figure, like, okay, it's on a mountain, it might be cold. So it was freezing by the time the performers got on stage. And so some of them actually walked out and didn't perform. The ones that did, one was swearing openly because it was so cold. Another professional, I mean, these were like blues musicians like John Lee Hooker, like top of the line. I mean, they must have lost a lot of money on this. And then the lights went out. So there was no lights at night. And so the audience members just decided they were going to have a little rebellion, got their vehicles, drove up, pointed the lights on the stage so that the musicians could see what they were doing in the audience. So that part was really amazing, and I thought, well, I could do this. How hard could it be? So I decided to start a music and film festival in New York Mills. That was the first sort of major event that we had. We got local folk musicians for the event. I worked with a local filmmaker to basically curate a short film festival, and we got film from all over the country. That was totally amazing. It poured rain the day of the festival, so we had to have it inside. So what I thought was going to be a total bust, we had 300 people packed into that cultural center. And at night, because there was such a time difference, we were going to have the films during the day, but because it was raining, we couldn't do it at the same time. So we got a big, huge piece of fabric and draped it over a building on Main Street and showed the films from the back of a pickup truck at night. And we were worried, well, you know, are people going to show up? We didn't charge for it because people already paid for the music part. People from the community just brought lawn chairs. Main Street was packed. We closed it off. There was several hundred people who just decided we're going to go do this, brought their lawn chairs, and saw it was probably a 45-minute film festival. It was amazing. Then the idea for the Great American Think-Off. I bring this off. It really wasn't a festival per se, but it was such an amazing event that got so much publicity for the community. And that's what I think festivals and ideas can bring to communities. You have ideas that can bring publicity. And one of my mentors and friends, Jim Buchan, that I mentioned before, he was a press secretary to the Surgeon General, lived in Washington, D.C., grew up in New York Mills, moved back to New York Mills to help with this project. He taught me a lot about publicity. And one of the things he said was, if you've got a unique idea, you've got a great story to tell that story, but have an angle. So make philosophy accessible, make it fun. So, you know, at our very first Think Off, we had banners, good versus evil. So there's a topic, is the nature of humankind good or evil? So we had 4 finalists from around the country, and they would debate the topic, 2 on each side. And the audience would be the judge. So the audience would vote on who had the best argument. So you had regular citizens of a community deciding the nature of good and evil. Well, our board in the chamber just thought it was a ridiculous idea and it wouldn't work. So I decided, okay, well, we're going to put up $2,000 in prize money. We're going to sell $50 front row philosopher seats and see what happens. But I used the public relations strategies that I learned from Jim to get national press. CNN covered the event. We got publicity from the Toronto Globe and Mail, Canadian Public Broadcasting. It was an international event because people wanted to know about this thing called a Think Off. And that really helped create this upward narrative and positive success story for the community. And in fact, C-SPAN covered the event 3 years live because we did a campaign to try to get C-SPAN to cover it. NBC covered it shortly thereafter. It was in 1996, the 3rd year of the Think Off, I learned about this internet company called Net Radio. And today, if you're doing a webcast, no big deal, right? Have interactive, you can phone in, you can call in, you can video in, not a big deal. In 1996, the Great American Think Off was actually the first live internet broadcast in the world. I didn't know it at the time that I was making history. There was no video, it was all radio, hence Net Radio hosting it. I called up the company, they'd been open for 2 months, and they did it for $1,200 only because they wanted to see if it would work. So I'm like, great. We had 4 people call in because there were probably about 100 real media players out there in the country. So there was a very small audience that could even listen to it. I think the only other truly live broadcast was the Rolling Stones. And that was done by a competing company that didn't have the technology for interaction. So in any case, because of that, this gets back to yesterday about the jobs, because a company heard about that publicity. It was a technology company. They actually moved to New York Mills and brought 100 jobs. So that was part of that job statistic. People thought, oh, New York Mills, technology. Let's locate our company there, not the next town over. Now, the whole purpose I was asked here to talk about was the Art in the Park Festival. And I realized I've been involved in other festival type things before, so I'm maybe might go over my 2 minutes, Randy. Okay, awesome. So again, Lanesboro, Minnesota, population 754. And I realized we don't just have the Art in the Park Festival, which has been going on for 37 years. There's other festivals too. In fact, festivals that Lanesboro Arts was a fiscal agent for and helped get started. Again, the population of Lanesboro. Wonderful bike trail, B&Bs. The town actually capped the limit on B&Bs at 17 because they were afraid too many historic houses were going to be off the market. So there's a limit to how many B&Bs there are in the community. Bluff Country Art Tour, over 40 different artists. It's a driving tour around the community and region that is really the official kickoff to the tourism season. Lanesboro Arts, our gallery, is one of the stops on the tour. This happens in April. It brings in huge amounts of traffic. Usually we have a $2,000 day in the gallery, the first day of this event. Artists love it, and people who are visiting the community love it as well. Now, I don't have that economic data from it, but anecdotally, it's sort of the official kickoff of the tourism season in Lanesboro. Bluff Country Gathering. It's an amazing bluegrass festival that happens in Lanesboro that also has a barn dance. It's over 3 days. Brings in some of the top bluegrass musicians from around the world into this little teeny town of Lanesboro. We were their fiscal agent for about 5 years. Now they got their own funding and do their own thing. Totally amazing music festival. The one slide I don't have, which I mistakenly forgot about, that also happens in May, is actually I would say a suburb of Lanesboro. It's a town called Whalen. Its population is 54, so it's not quite there with Rosebud, but it tries. They have something, they have a parade that draws probably 2,000 people every year. It's a 4-hour parade, but the town is so small that there's nowhere to go in the parade, so they just stand still. It's called the Whalen Standstill Parade. So they just stand there, and then everyone walks around them. So there's a fire truck, there's like the Girl Scouts, there's the Legion, but they're just standing there, and you walk around them.
Now I understand why Bob Dylan and my dad were the men they are.
Yes. So, and that happens just the weekend before the Bluff Country Gathering. So there's all these things happening before Art in the Park even happens. And this has been going on for 27 years, the Bluff Country Gathering. Now the next event is the Rhubarb Festival. That's been going on for 13 years. And it was started to help support the farmers market because people didn't know about the farmers market. Well, let's hold something called a Rhubarb Festival, and we'll have a one-day event. We'll have fun, we'll have rhubarb. That's actually the rhubarb toss. There's the rhubarb games. They tried to have the rhubarb Olympics until they got a letter from the International Olympic Committee telling them to cease and desist. They were like, wow, that is the most awesome thing ever. You're getting shut down by the Olympic Committee for a rhubarb festival. You gotta So I was telling them to make the same kind of press that Peter was talking about, but they really didn't want to make a big deal of it. So they just changed it to the Rhubarb Games. So I thought it'd be fun to take on the, International Olympic Committee, but because of the efforts of the Rhubarb sisters, they lobbied again, the Prairie Home Companion, for 2 years to come to Lanesboro to do a live Prairie Home Companion. That's actually a shot from the softball field in Lanesboro that's got rhubarb behind it. The Rhubarb sisters went to the Fitzgerald Theater where Prairie Home Companion was being broadcast and dressed up as rhubarb leaves. So that's finally what got Garrison Keillor to do the show from Lanesboro. It cost $250,000 to set up the show in the ball field. That was the cost. The entire community came together to put this event on that brought in over 4,000 people to the community. This was just this past June's event, Rhubarb's Angels. So each year the Rhubarb sisters do a different theme. This year's theme was Charlie's Angels. The Rhubarb Fest gets visitors from all over the country, and now is like a worldwide event. And Lanesboro itself gets, I think last year the Chamber tracked 28 different countries that visited Lanesboro, just of the people that checked in at the visitor center. There's little dots on the map from the visitors. And of course, Lanesboro Arts has a booth for Rhub-Art, and kids have a chance to take rhubarb leaves and make art. We had over 400 kids participate in this year's Rhub-Art Festival. And of course, Art in the Park. That's been going on for 37 years. It was started by the Lanesboro Art Council as a way to engage the community in the arts and have a festival that celebrates the arts. I'm just going to stop for a second because this year's Art in the Park happened while I was on the road. And I don't know if I mentioned it to anyone here what happened the night before Art in the Park. There was a performance, a theater performance called Art, Audacious Raw Theater. We had an amazing theater production. The power went out right after the show ended. Straight line winds hit Lanesboro, 90-mile-an-hour winds. Tore up trees all over the community. This was June 16th. That's one of the gazebos that we sell pies in. So I got this text, and nothing else went with it because I was in no cell service coming up here. And I just thought, well, that's a huge dollar amount that maybe we're not going to have if the event's canceled. So I called up during the day and talked with our gallery director and volunteers. The community had worked through the night with chainsaws and cleanup efforts to clean up the park and the community for Art in the Park. Overnight. Those were the bands that we had. And Art in the Park that day, it was one of the most successful Art in the Parks we've ever had. We moved it from a Sunday, which was Father's Day, to Saturday based upon feedback from some of my young staff who did evaluations for Art in the Parks. More people wanted it on Saturday. The artists wanted it on Saturday, so we moved it to Saturday. Friday night, we had those straight line wins, and the community came together, and it was the best Art in the Park we've ever had. And the one thing I wanted to mention from yesterday was the work that I did in New York Mills. I talked about the first art classes that we had in the community in the Cultural Center. And the first class that we did, it was a puppet making workshop, and it was for first graders. And we had a puppet parade the day that the Cultural Center opened. Well, it turns out there was a 6-year-old girl who attended that very first class. And this past weekend was the 25th anniversary of the Think Off, and I told them I couldn't be there because I wanted to be here. The new director of the New York Mills Cultural Center, her name's Betsy. She moved back to New York Mills to take the job as executive director. She's got a family. She's got 3 kids. She wanted to come back to help the community of New York Mills. So arts can make a difference in people's lives. Arts can make a difference to bring community together. Thank you.